Converse volunteers have worked 10 years for the cable access group on getting Converse local access television. And we want to thank you for watching. If you have any comments as to what you'd like to see, let us know. Drop us a line at Post Office Box 1314, Converse, Texas, 78101.
Howie Marbach. I was born and raised in Converse. I've lived here for almost 79 years. My mother was born and raised in this community. My grandfather moved here in 1902 and raised his family here. And I have been active in the community throughout that time, except for the year that I was in the Navy and the 2 years when I got drafted into the Army. I have never been in any political position, but I have been active within my community in many other ways. I would like to give a little short history, verbal history, of our community. Converse initially became a community back in 1864 when the locals got together and built the first school. The school, what the name was, we're not sure, but we do know that it was the only school between Seguin, New Braunfels, and San Antonio. So therefore, Converse became a focal point for those country people. The school no longer exists. It was torn down in about 1949. The new school was built in 1910, which has also been moved. As a young boy, I lived on Kniper Avenue, which is close to my grandfather and grandmother lived, which their home still is there, and so is our old home. We used to play marbles in the street on the gravel road that was there. There was the Simon and Boyful store, which was one of the first stores in this area. I'm not sure exactly when the date was, when it was formed, but it was somewhere in the late 1800s. We also had cotton gins. We had two cotton gins, a steam cotton gin owned by Simon and Boyful, and a electric cotton gin owned by Kniper and Meyer. In fact, the old Simon Boyful store in 1944, I would think it was during the war, it closed right after the war. I bought my first shotgun there. It was a 20-gauge shotgun that I paid $5.25 for. I guess around the 1920s, maybe before then, the late 1910s, Gold's store was built. Gold's store was a grocery store or general store, plus it was also a post office for Converse. I had the misfortune to see a shooting with my cousin during the day while we were looking at the candy, which was quite scary for boys that were 10 and 11 years old. In fact, that's the first shooting I ever heard of in this community. Converse also had I think earlier, had two cotton gins, which was one of the reasons for this growth in this area. There's one right behind the Justice Center here. It would belong to my grandfather, was electric gin, and the steam gin, Simon and Boyful gin, was over at where Hamilton's Corner is there. In fact, that building is part of the old gin. There was a time when I was a youngster, down 78 used to run right through the middle of town here, and there would be wagons with cotton on them about a half a mile down that road and half a mile down Gibbs Sprawl Road, waiting in line to have their cotton ginned. Also, in relationship to that, Mr. Gold was also, who owned the store, was also a cotton broker. And because it's important that at that particular time that they were able to make contact with markets in the East, my grandfather, Theo Kniper, and Mr. H.H. Gold got the first telephone line running to Converse. In relation to that, when Randolph was built in 1930, all their phones ran through our switchboard over here on the old Lombrakes home, which was, and that was for several years. One day, quit that, I don't know, but with modern technology, things jumped. As time passed, they built, I guess it was in 1891, they built a dance hall, which was a singing group, which was the Solid Trio Liederkranz Hall. They did singing there and drank their beer there. And with Germans, singing and drinking kind of go together. And it was torn down when to replace it with this Justice Center here in Converse.
Wow.
Which I thought was a shame because it was the social area, the social center for this area, because they had dances there. Those guys used to, they had this thing called a bullpen. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, what is that?
You'd go into the building and there was a fence there and you paid up in front, but you could stand up and you could scout, see if there's any good looking gals in there. And then if you wanted to, you saw some good looking gals, you paid and you went in and you asked for a dance and wished for the best, and if you got a dance, well, maybe you could carry on a conversation. And so that's where I learned to dance, was the old Solid Trio Liederkranz Hall.
Wow.
Also, they had many weddings there. They had school plays there. It was just a shame that it was torn down, but sometimes that happens in society today. My wife's dad, who lived in Converse, they moved out of Converse, and when she was 5 years old, they moved to Cibolo, where her parent, my wife's parents were from. But father-in-law played in an old Umpapa band for 52 years until he couldn't play. And my wife would go along and they would make a little pallet for her up on the stage, and she'd sleep while they were making music and everybody was dancing. And,
Wow.
well, like I say, it was built in 1891, and it was in existence for about 100 years, a little over 100 years. And it eventually was torn down to be replaced by this Justice Center. But in the dais of the council chambers, they have poured the old original wood floor from that building in there.
I didn't know that.
So I thought that was nice. So the part of the old hall is still in its same spot. Most of the people that lived in this area at that particular time were, in fact, there was hardly nobody living there. In about 1832, I saw a map of landowners in this area, and they were all Spanish surnames. In the next one I saw was in 1866, I think, and there wasn't, I don't think, any Spanish surname here anymore. From Converse area down to 10, and below 10 was all Polish and Czech. All that had changed in that 25, 30-year period. And I think what caused the Germans to move this way was New Braunfels was a German settlement that was settled in 1845. And of course, as it grew, the predominant livelihood was farming. And you know, New Braunfels could only own so many farms, and I guess the old saying of go west, young man, go west, and so they went west towards San Antonio and purchased property and built their farms, and that's why this was originally built by German settlers. There was a few Spanish-speaking Mexican people. They helped in conjunction with building of the farms and worked in some of the stores and things like that. But it was predominantly a German community. They were all farmers predominantly. And of course, the king, of course, was cotton. And that's why we had the cotton gins. And of course, during that time, as time started changing, I remember we formed a Lions Club here in this community. I don't know how many people are aware of what Lions do, but Lions help people less fortunate than themselves. It was formed, they got their charter in 1949, and we were chartered by the Seguin Lions Club, and we're still active. We've been active for 62 years, I guess. Another thing that might be of interest is that the first 5 mayors that we had were active members of the Lions Club, as which were many of the councilmen. You know, I think, in fact, it was probably like it is in some of the small communities in Texas yet. If you want to be somebody, you got to be in the Lions Club in order to, that's where all the doers were busy in. About that same time, we formed a fire department because due to a home burning down, Randolph was busy at the particular time, and we depended, Shirts and Converse depended upon them to supply us with fire service. But they were busy with their own fires, so they couldn't get here, and by the time they got here, the house on Leisure Drive had burned down. And so that prompted the people of this area to form a fire department, and we did do that in 1951 or 52, I forgot the exact date. And we built our own fire truck, which was a 1949 Dodge. I remember an incident when we were working on the truck. It had it pretty well finished, had the tanks on it and the pumps installed. And they were doing some painting, and they were painting the running board silver on top and black on the bottom. And Linwood Siebel was painting the silver on the top, and Curtis Five was painting black on the bottom, and they kept, throwing a little paint at each other, and before you knew it, one of them got out from the bottom, they started rolling in the dirt and sticking paintbrushes in their ears, and it was just a exciting time. Converse was a city, or not a city, a community that helped itself. We built that fire truck and formed our own fire department. We had our own water service that was offered by my grandpa, Kneiper, across the 78 at that time, and Mr. Kneiper, who was our first mayor, and the Church's water system. They supplied us with good water, which was Edwards Water in this area. We also developed our own sewer system. So, of course, then later on, San Antonio River Authority came and took over, and so we closed it up. And that sewer, where that sewer system was, is now the first original city park.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so Converse was, we really formed because San Antonio was moving out. They were coming in, and the local people figured that we'd much rather have direct input to what happens in our community than have to go through San Antonio. So we formed our community, formed a city. I had the good fortune to be going to St. Mary's at the time. I was taking a course in city and town government, and a bunch of the people that were trying to form the city said, "Hey, Howie, you're taking this class in St. Mary's now. Why don't you get all this stuff together for us?" So I did. As best I could, I got all the information for them, and then of course they were interested I might run for city council or mayor, and I said, "Nope, I don't operate in that area." But Mayor Ed Kneiper, who's what the Justice is named for, Center is named for, was the first mayor for 10 years, and then Joe Stout was the mayor for 8 years, all local people that were just about born and raised in this area. Converse was rather slow to grow because our main impetus was to not be controlled by San Antonio. Once we'd accomplished that, we kind of start slowing up, but also all of our land was farmland. When you moved up toward University City and Live Oak, that was more pasture land, rocky land. It was not as good farmland, so that land sold pretty rapidly. And that's one of the reasons why University City and Live Oak grew considerably faster than Converse. Converse was just content being a small community and doing what we do, and we did that quite well. It was, if we needed something, the citizens got together and more or less did it themselves. But of course, we know though that you can't stand still, and the city was very slow in annexing land, which Shirts, of course, was not. That's why they annexed all the land behind Randolph Air Force Base, and we kind of got blocked in. I would like to see the city, and I think there is some effort, some real dialogue being developed on trying to annex all along 1604 to 10, which I think would be a great boon for business purposes, because we know that running a city on ad valorem tax is extremely hard. So you need a lot of business and sales tax